Okay, good evening. And this is March 22nd of 22. And we're going to talk about building and using insect hotels and our ability to help our insects out and them. We help out the insects help us in return. So this is a great little project that you can do at home. And I have offered different types of building plans to build your own hotels. So you have that as a resource for you. So if you want to start one, I think this would be a fun in-person class sometime to teach. So maybe we can do something as a big group regionally or in a couple different locations and build some insect hotels. I think it'd be lots of fun. So, and it's more than just the bees. We talk about the bees because that's what gets us all the attention, but the other insects are also important as well. So we're going to get started here. Okay, so our objectives is understand and apply the functions of those hotels and the differences in designs, because not all of them look the same. There are differences. Understand and apply the optimal location and the growing environment for hotels. And also understand what type of materials are needed and how to build them. So lots of good information to share. And the big question is, so what? This is the so what that we always fight when we do programming in Extension or Master Gardener. Why should we care? Or why should we learn about it? Or why should we do it? Because 3/4 of the world's flowers and 35% of the food crops in the world depend on animal pollination for production, including the insects. We have 30% of our 5,000 bee species that are native live in cavities and tunnels above the ground, different than the honeybee. So these are bee species that are native to our states and different parts of the United States that do not live in the ground, like some of our ground dwellers, and they don't live in a hive like our honeybee. That is an introduced species. So honeybees are not native to the United States. So we had other really great bee species doing their job of pollinating before the honeybee came around. There's been lots of habitat destruction for those beneficial insects. We talked about destroying the shelter belts and the tree lines on fields. That was one big one. People going to really monoculture type landscapes where we have less diversity in our landscapes and having less of an environment for these good insects to come and eat and populate and help pollinate our food crops as well as our ornamentals. So it's a win-win. So what we're trying to do is provide a habitat for these beneficial insects and conserve their populations. And like feeding birds, if you provide an environment and supplies and resources, they will come back. And if we don't use a lot of pesticides, they'll definitely come back as well. So this also brings in IPM. So it's really important for us to use right plant, right place, and the right environment to begin with, and being mindful of the different types of insects in our landscape, whether they're beneficial or harmful. And if we can attract the beneficial insects, we're definitely attracting a lot of those native bees and a lot of our pollinators that do a yeoman job for us all on their own. So here's a really quick little table from the Xerces Society. If you've never heard of the Xerces Society, they are the resource for entomology and insects. Great resource to check out. They have lots of publications. They work alongside Extension. So that's kind of like the Audubon Society works along with Extension as well. They're not in a university per se, but they work alongside us and work together really well. So it talks about 1 to 3 bites of food that we eat are a result from animal-assisted pollination. Livestock that grazes on alfalfa or clover require those insect pollinated crops for them to graze on, which we've talked about that in Nebraska. We need to make sure that we have healthy pollinator populations to help sustain our ability to graze cattle in the state. That bees keep agricultural buzzing. Bees and other pollinators are directly responsible for economically and nutritionally important crops across the country. Some of those crops are very high value crops. So one crop that gets a lot of attention, of course, are the almonds in California, where you will see semis of bees going west for the winter, and they make a handsome profit by taking their truckloads of bees out to California, placed in the almond groves. They pollinate that crop because it's a very high value crop. They assist in the reproduction of plants used for fibers such as cotton and flax. So if you think of the cotton industry and where cotton is used and all the products we have, that's pretty amazing. They beautify our landscape. So we talk about diversifying landscapes that are sustainable, that don't require lots of extra care. So we're going back to utilizing the natives and utilizing management practices that fit the natives so they can thrive. They also are a major part of nutrients such as vitamin E that are essential for our personal diets. And many animals depend on the fruits, nuts, and seeds produced as a result of insect pollination. So this takes us full circle. Maybe this looks a little elementary to some of you, but it's always a good reminder to know how important these insects are. And it's more than just the honeybee. So we have lots of other really great insects that do a good job. So we're going to talk about hotel function and the type of hotels and why they are important and why we need to correctly build them and place them and utilize them. First is for the shelter, for their ability to start the next generation of insects, a place for them to lay larvae. They are for beautification and inspiration. So they help bring more good insects into the environment because you provided a home. You support the native ecosystem and crop production by having them placed in the yard and landscape in the neighborhoods. Encourages our beneficials to come back. So if we're doing mindful management with our integrated pest management, starting with right plant in the right place, the right environment, with the correct watering and maintenance needs, then we're not going to rely on those chemicals such as an insecticide or a fungicide because we have a fungus growing such as downy mildew because we don't have enough air circulation. All those things that we learn are ways to reduce those products used in the landscape, and it improves nutrient cycling. So it's a win-win for everyone involved. Here's some pictures of our common friends here. So we have on the left side of our screen, this is the leaf cutter, or these are the mason bees. So they're metallic in color. They are a little bit different. They're not as big as a honeybee. They have that bluish color to them. They're quite interesting. They have horns. So you see the little horns out there by their mandibles and their mouth parts and their eyes. So they are very helpful. The next one is the upper right, which is our leaf cutter bee. We talked about the leaf cutters, how they make those almost perfect circles in the leaves of our roses especially. They are out feeding. They're out gathering nutrients, but they're also cutting that plant material. So as they lay larvae in those sticks, they're using that material as wadding, as a protection, as a cell for those larvae to grow and develop, and they'll chew their way out and fly out the end of those holes. And then the next one is a little bee that's called a carder bee. And so these are 3 examples of native Nebraska bees that are highly valuable in pollination that we usually don't think about. So they're really pretty amazing creatures. The next one is to also be thinking of the life cycle. And I'm just showing you one life cycle of like the leafcutter bee. This is the publication from Michigan State, and it is a really good one. It talks about the life cycle of when this is happening. So if you think first of the bees that are coming out, they will chew their way out, they will mate, then they will be gathering resources, then they're going to bring their wadding in. And remember when we talked to Kathleen Q, that the female cells are always planted at the beginning because they're going to be the last ones coming out. So the last cells that are planted in there and capped off, the ones that emerge are your males, and they're going to be out. So it talks about that process. So you'll see them develop and chew their way out, and there you go. So the life cycle continues. This entire Michigan State publication is on the website, and it's printed for everyone who's here in North Platte tonight. So you can pull that and download it as you want, or if you want a paper copy, I've got paper copies here in the office. But it's good to know the different life cycles of each of the insects for us to know on when they're going to be emerging, when are they going to be collecting resources, when they're going to be laying their cells in there. That's all really, really important. So that's good. So now we're going to talk about our materials that we need. And these are some really good examples of what different species will like. And yes, you will see beetles, you will see centipedes, you'll see the ladybird beetles, you'll see centipedes, millipedes, and spiders. All of these are good insects that can be found in a hotel. It depends on what you offer them. The number one product that we see in a bee hotel are those stems or the bamboo rods. But you will see other houses that have screens where you can shove leaves in and then screw the screen back on. So that helps your centipedes, your good beetles, and your harvestmen come out, be a place for them to reproduce and come back. Also strips of bark with your centipedes, millipedes, and your good spiders. So they're in there as well. So really, really good information all the way around. So, and you probably wonder, how in the world is this resource from the University of Michigan Dearborn? Because the University of Michigan system is not a land-grant university. It's the rival to Michigan State University, and they receive funding from the Ford Foundation. Many times, some of our other institutions work quite a bit with ecological biology, and they work on different projects that would complement what we do in the land-grant systems. So this is a table from the University of Michigan Dearborn that was really good. And the building plans that I posted are all three from the University of Michigan Dearborn, really well drawn, shows you really good step-by-step instruction, just all the way out wonderful. So when we talk about plant tubes, if you want to not buy the bamboo, here are some plants that provide different types of hollow stems. Some of these plants you will find in your gardens, in your landscapes. Or you can be very mindful of going out and raising some of these plants so you can harvest them and replace your tubes. So for those of you who like to do that, here's your opportunity. So it's really good. So you'll see some, asters with large stems. My gosh, that's a huge family. That's the aster family is also, we call it the sunflower family. So you have lots of different choices there that they grow here. Bee balm is Monarda. We do have quite a few people that raise Monarda. That's a natural plant, native plant here. Honeysuckle, we have honeysuckle, we try to control planting of honeysuckle because it can have kind of an invasive nature. in the landscape. Joe Pye weed is a great native plant that we are growing for our pollinator project for Nebraska Game and Parks. We also have Joe Pye weed in our garden here at the Extension Office. Raspberries and blackberries, the canes work perfect. Sumac, we have the native sumac, like the skunk sumac or the staghorn. We also have some of the more developed tamed sumac like tiger eye, which is a really nice landscape plant. You can use those. Of course, all those sunflowers and your roses. So don't feel bad about taking your canes off of your hybrid tea rows when you're cutting them back. You could use those. And a lot of times you will see leaf cutter bees down in the pith. They will dug that out and they will lay their larvae and they will pack those canes back tight full of larvae. So they're doing it on their own. We're just wanting to help them along. So here's an example of some bamboo. And you will see that they need different diameters. So you don't want all the same size. You want various sizes. You will also see that some of these have packing material in them. And you can see where something's chewed out of one of them right there. So I take my magic wand here, my laser pointer. See right here, this guy and this guy. So someone's chewed their way out. So that's something you can do really easy. So that's kind of fun. The bundles are the easiest way to work with those. So that's awesome. You can vary them from 1/16 of an inch open to a 1/2 inch open. So you want to vary them around. We do have a house here. Morgan's going to pass it around. So we want them different sizes because they're going to attract different insect species. And you'll see that some of them probably have the wadding in there, just like in our picture. So the tubes and the stems need to be 5 to 8 inches long so they can burrow deep enough to, in the case like the leafcutter bee, produce the females and burrow them deep. It's best to use string or zip ties. So you're going to put them together, and it's good to zip tie them together or put them in string together and put them back in the frame so you can literally clean out a whole section or replace a whole section at a time. So that makes management a lot easier. You can also take your bundles and you can put them into containers. So if you have cans or cinder blocks, buckets, small little buckets, pails, PVC pipe, you can shove them in there and then you can take them in and out. And so that's kind of handy. It's really important that the back side has to be blocked or at least screened in. So you do not have any parasites or any threat coming from the backside in. So that's important as well. The next one is building the frame. And this is the information from our NEB guide on doing our bee hotel. The frame that you would put all your bamboo bundles or your blocks or your cans or your PVC pipes needs to be at least 6 inches deep and 10 inches wide. So they do not have to be big hotels. And there's lots of different shapes and sizes that are possible, whether you make them or you buy one from someone else. They need to have the solid frame back, so the only entrance is coming in and out, where the beneficial insect is laying the larva in there and then closing that off. And they also need to have a slanting roof, so and an overhang, so it does not get wet into those tubes. So it has that little bit of protection, so water runs off and goes backwards away from the opening of your frame. So here's some examples of frames that were done. This was in the NEB guide. Do not use treated lumber with toxicity issues. And you can paint the wood. That's perfectly fine. And you can make them colorful. You'll see people decorated them and did all kinds of fun designs on them. So that's perfectly fine. Yes. We would have to look as to what it is. Probably something that's non-lead. I'm guessing, definitely non-lead, but I'd have to research that. If like a water-based paint might work. So, or the crafting paint that kids use. So we can see this as a fun activity for children. So that I would have to do some research. We can do that during break if you like. So here's the other part about not using the treated lumber. You can paint them. We'll look up the paint sources. Logs and boards must be a minimum of 4 inches deep because they do need to have at least some depth for them to lay those cells in there. And the drilling holes can vary from 3/32, which is not much, to 3/8 inch wide. And they will do the rest. They will go and take care of the rest for you. And you vary the hole depth from 3 to 6 inches deep. So preferably, we would like to go 6 inches. So you would have some 3-inch deep cells and some 6-inch deep cells. And the more variety that you have in your blocks and in your bundles and in your screened in area for your material, the more variety of insect species that will be attracted to come in. And here is a great diagram that was from that same NEB guide. So it talks about the different types of bees that would be expected, for instance, on the bee side on the space. So the Carter bees and your blue orchard bees, your mason bees, really like those larger openings. And then it goes down smaller. Then you have the mason bees can actually fit into quite a few sizes. The leaf cutter likes a smaller size. And we have the horn-faced bees, which those are kind of cool, as well as the little polyester bees. So this is a great set of drawings for you to see visually the depth that you need to go. Mix it up, change it around. So, and you get to bring out your drill and all your drill bits. So, and work on them. So lots of choices there. This is a great picture from Michigan State. You can see how they've aligned it. How they took this example. So they just went right down the line on one size, and that was the size, and then they go from larger to smaller. And it's good to use the long drill bits, of course, so you can go in pretty deep.
Which kind of bee likes the smaller?
They call polyester bees. We'll show you a picture of them. Polyester bees, horn-faced bees, and your leaf cutters, like the smaller openings. So when you think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different species of native bees can be hosted in a hotel if you put your blocks and your tubes together right, just on the bee species, not counting anything else. So you can bring a lot of variation in, make it habitable and encouraging.
Those bees aren't antagonistic being next to each other, are they?
The question is whether these species would be antagonistic. Generally not. Generally not. There will be some interaction between insects, but the amount of loss from a fight and a kill is minimal compared to the population that you're going to attract. So you're going to lose some, but the possibility of gaining way more is higher, quite higher, than not even having anything available. So yeah, you're not going to, not everyone's going to survive on this, but you will have a variety going, and that's good.
I have a lot of never kill. I don't know what the technical name for that is, but in my plantings. And some kind of bee is attracted to it, but there were black bees. I don't know what those were.
I can show you a table of native Nebraska bees. We can show you what those. Here's a picture from North Carolina State Extension. of some different houses and designs. You can set on cinder blocks. You can take a pallet and put down, and then you can put your cinder blocks, and the openings of your cinder blocks can be a place to put all your blocks in, or you can put in your tubes. So utilize those openings in those cinder blocks. Works perfect. So you can stack them and do all kinds of fun things. So lots of variation. And you see the one clear on the right that has the screen for the leaves. So you just basically at the end of the year, you're going to replenish leaves for the centipedes and the millipedes, for instance, there. So most of the time we hang our houses up on a pedestal, with the exception of like this one that was a cinder block one. And you want to make sure that they're, right in amongst your native plants. So they're in hog heaven. Here's a picture in wintertime of the Xerces Society, and you see all the variation there. So they have bricks in there. They have cross sections of wood that were used. There are tubes in there. They've got looks like some hay or some straw packed in there. Just a great mix of things to attract them. And of course, hopefully they're all sealed in nice and tight and developing over the winter so they can eat their way out and emerge in the spring. So very handy. Okay, so optimal location and maintenance. Kathleen talked about that a little bit with the pollinator gardening the other couple weeks ago. It's good to have them 4 to 5 feet above ground on a post or up again on a fence or something sturdy that's attached. And then, or you can have them on the pallets or on the concrete blocks. But the bricks with the tubes and the blocks have to be higher up. They can't be at ground level. They need to be higher up. So you have to build it up and then put them on. So it's really good to have them posed at an eastern exposure so they get the warmth from the sun as the sun comes up and they can move out. If you use too much shaded area, you can accidentally attract more spider species that can be a contaminant. So beware of a really shaded area. That eastern sun needs to be nice and warm. The ideal, according to Michigan State, is southeast. So that you get some of the south exposure, but not cooking the poor creatures. So east and southeast is the best way to go. So, and I can understand that. I'm looking at my landscape where I would put a pallet down in my stacks of bricks and my stacks of cinder blocks, and it makes sense. So we want to make sure that there's protection from the rain, the wind, and your insect predators. And you want to make sure that they're secured tightly to the walls or structure. And if you do something that's freestanding, it has a solid back on it, so nothing's trying to invade from the back end and killing larvae. So that's important. So that's also another factor. Here's a picture from the NEB guide that shows the fence, and you can see all the lovely plant material that those insects are going to have immediate activity with and right by. So a lot of us are trying to convert our landscapes into more eco-friendly, where we're reducing our pesticide use, and that's a win-win. And also, like Kathleen said, a water source for those insects to gain water, the trays with the rocks and the pebbles, and let them land on there and draw their water and get their water source. So that's really, really good too. Okay, maintenance is clean out your tubes each winter with pipe cleaners or a narrow rod. The ones that are open, clean those out. And you can use very narrow wire to go through your tubes and pull them out. Or sometimes those really narrow brushes that you use to scrub your straws with your drink cups. Your metal drink cups have those funny straws. You can shove those in and pull them back. Don't use it on your drink cup again, but that would work easy along with the pipe cleaner. Maybe a little tougher than the pipe cleaner. replace your nesting materials. So if the nesting materials like fallen leaves and the pine needles, for example, if that dissipates over time, you need to replenish it. But it's always good to replace that. Reeds need to be replaced every 2 years, your stems. And by 2 years' time, they've really aged and broken apart and aren't in the great shape.
The bamboo,
Yeah, your bamboo reeds or your plant stems.
they break down that fast?
They can. They can. So on replacing those reeds, if they're still in decent shape, that haven't broken down and haven't rotted away, you could probably keep some of those, or you can just do a clean sweep and trade them out. And see if you have them tied together by string or by a zip tie, then you can pull it out as a section, inspect the sections, and then clean them out. You can rebore your blocks with your drill bits. So just cleaning them out. If there's nothing in there, that's great. If you want to do a complete wash with those blocks, you use a 10% bleach solution, go outside. So you take your blocks out in the sun, make your 10% bleach solution, which would be 1 cup of bleach and 9 cups of lukewarm water mixed together well. Pour over the openings of your blocks and let them set, and that'll kill a lot of bacteria out. But if you have a lot of activity where there's a lot of plugged cells, I wouldn't do that because you're going to kill them. But if you have a lot of empty holes and think it's time after a couple of years to do some renovation, bore everything out, give them the bleach solution on a warm day in winter, let it all dry out, place it back in, and it's ready for next spring. So these are the references that we talked about. So the Michigan State publication is here, and the Solitary Bee Hotel is the next one, the UNL one that was written here locally. And then this is the article from North Carolina State Extension. That's some good pictures of different types of insects. And then the insect hotels from the University of Michigan Dearborn. So that was really fascinating that the Ford Foundation gave funding to that. So sometimes we will see universities that are not land grants doing work in evolutionary biology, for example, that complement what we do. And this is one of those cases. So do your research. That might be a really credible source. So I was glad to show this to you because it does have some different options for you to see some examples, and I wanted to share that. And their drawings are fantastic. So if you want to make your own bee hotel, it's set. So you're ready to go. So that is the end of the slide set. And of course, my contact information. So that's easy to do. Are there any questions so far?
Online. Would there be any reason why you couldn't just take a section of a wood pile that you'd like to season for the year and use it?
The question is, can you use a wood pile that's already freestanding, that's already weathering? And the answer would be yes. If you have a wood pile that's sitting there open faced, that your holes aren't going to go, your drill is not going to go clear through the back, yeah, you could do that. Absolutely. And if you noticed, if you ever moved that wood pile, the whole environment of insects that you disrupt when you move them. So absolutely. So that's something you can do really easy.
Will honeybees use them?
Honeybees are, the question is, will honeybees use these? And the answer is no. They are not solitary bees, they're community bees, where you have the queen who controls the entire network of the hive. You have the worker that are female workers that keep her clean the cells of the larva, fight off any pests or any invaders. They will also be the ones that lay down the honey on the comb, they build comb. And then you have the drone, the male, that, like in the case of your leafcutter bee, they're out and about, buzzing around. They eat a lot of food generally. and they're waiting for their chance to mate with the queen. And once they mate with the queen, they die. So the queen controls how many male drones she lays on purpose, because she can't have more male drones than her workers, because that is a sap on the resources of the hive. So honeybees are community insects. So it's very fascinating. Bee behavior is absolutely fascinating. So we have our native bees, and then we have the honeybee. And so that's really a lot of fun to talk about, and talk about the come and go, the give and take of these species. So, but really fascinating. How about we take a 10-minute break for the bathroom, and then I will pull up the table of native Nebraska bee species. We can also post this on the website, and we can talk about the paint, the insect-friendly paints. So that will be good, because we want to give information out that is correct. And the old adage is, if you don't know it, look it up. Don't try to fake it. So, I did not know that, and I'm going to look that information up. And so we will have a more educated answer on that. So let's break for 10 minutes and we'll be back.
Hey, David, this is Patty.
And I'm going to share the screen because I found some tables that I think you'll like. Drop my email down. So here is a plant list that really helps native bees in Nebraska. This was off of a statewide arboretum article several years ago, and I took the screenshot of it and saved it. So these are some really nice plants that we use. Notice how they also fall into our list of plants that are beneficial for pollinators. So it's not just the bees, but these also have in here. So asters, bee balm produces stems, black-eyed Susans. You can get very small black-eyed Susans up to the big wild gangly ones. The blanket flower, which is Gaillardia. The butterfly milkweed, which is the orange pretty flowered plant in the pastures. Black cherry, if we have any black cherry around here, but any cherries that bloom in the spring, their blossoms are good. Your coneflowers, there are many different subspecies of coneflowers. There's daisies. So even if you have some introduced daisies that are not wild or not native, they will work. Goldenrod, there is the wild goldenrod. There's a domesticated wild goldenrod that's called Fireworks. That is absolutely wonderful in the landscape. So that's one to think about. So think about Fireworks if you want something that has been domesticated, is a great one. The gay feather we call also Liatris or Blazing Star or Kansas gay feather. Those are perennials. You'll see they were also talked about in Kathleen's presentation, also in the butterfly gardening one. Maples produce a lot of sap, and aphids like to suck on the juice off of the leaves, and then they leave you all those nice sticky spots on your vehicles and your windshields. Did you know that bee species will go up and recycle that? They will collect it off the windshields, for example, and pull it up, and they will reuse it. Red buds. We have people that have red bud in their landscapes, even out west, that are in protected areas. Sedum, the different types of sedum, and then the the sumac, like the staghorn. But we also talked about tiger eye, meaning that one is that one's an introduced one that's been domesticated as well, been developed. So you have some resources there. I will have this saved to the website. Have Vicki do that for us. And this is a really nice table of common bees that we would see in Nebraska. So there's some mining bees, carpenter bees. We have the mason bee. There's a yellow-faced bee. There's a sweat bee. We've seen the sweat bees that circle around the trash cans during summer picnics. Yeah, they're there. You have the leaf cutter, which we've talked about, the bumble. There's the longhorn bee. There's also the female is going to be bigger and more bold in color than the male in this case. There's the diggers that dig, but they're one that you can think about as well. There's a cuckoo bee. I have never really heard much about it before, really studied it, but I think they must be kind of cool. So here's another table of bees that I will share with you as well. And then the other question was about paint. And the bee-friendly type paint would be types that would not contain fungicide. And that would make sense where you're trying to paint something and you don't want mold or mildew to build up. So there is a touch of fungicide in that product, and that would be detrimental to the bees. So that would be something to think about when you look on the label of the different types of paint. Of course, lead paint, you don't want to use anyway. But the crafting paint that you find at the craft stores for craft projects, those are perfectly fine. I'm sure they do not contain that fungicide. But those are some of the things that I wanted to share right away. And I had to go dig on my computer to find those pictures because it's been a while. But you can see how it all really melts together. What's good for the butterflies and the moths and the skippers are also good for your beneficial insects that eat off of your predators, off your pest insects in the garden and the landscape. And they're also very beneficial to the bee species, not just our honeybee. There's also, I don't know if I kept it or not. There was a chart of the bumblebee species of Nebraska, and I'm hoping I kept it. Maybe I didn't, but we'll look it up real quick here. This is another article from the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum that is really good. I will save it. I can actually put it on chat here, and I will save it to the chat box and put it in, but I will also have it posted because Statewide Arboretum is one of our great friends and supporters. So we talks about fall cleanup, talks about the different types of flies that are beneficial also, that are pollinators, along with our beetles. Even the blister beetle ends up on here. Now, not good for people that are harvesting hay, but that's in there. So lots of different plants at different heights and different types of the season. So I think you will all really like this list. So it also has the velvet ant in here. Some people really get freaked out by the velvet ant and our cicada, praying mantis, and then our firefly. So lots of neat pictures and really quick descriptions of these insects, and some people that are contributors to Statewide Arboretum, including Bob Hendrickson, who gave us a presentation earlier this season. So a really good set of information that we'll share with everyone. But let me find, because a bumblebee is not just a bumblebee. There's lots of different, and here's the chart. These are the different types of bumblebees that are in Nebraska. Isn't that amazing? And I thought you might be interested in that as well. I can put this on the chat as well.
Will we be able to pull that up and pull it out?
Yes. We'll post it on the website and then you can pull it up and print it. So there it is. So I thought that might be fun as well. So there's lots of different variations, and it talks about ones that are Western or Eastern species specifically, and it gives you what we call a key to tell whether there's red on the body or not, or if it's a black-tailed species, or it has white on the body. So for those of you who are going to get up and close and personal with these guys and gals, you can have a little bit of an idea. Bumblebees in general are very docile, and they're not going to bother you unless you bother them. And that's something that we really try hard to teach with children, that these insects are gentle. They're not going to harm you unless you harm them. And so you don't want to start screaming, running, flailing your legs. That's when you start getting into trouble. So that rule works for adults as well as kids. I will say if you are allergic, do beware for those of you who do have to carry an EpiPen. So I understand that. I have a brother-in-law that we were hanging back home and we were throwing bales and we drove over a nest. And so, yeah, they attacked him and thankfully he had his pen. So it was not by accident. We were just going around picking up hay after the swather had come in and done its job and the baler had come in and done its job. Then we were throwing bales. And so that's when we really aggravated a bunch of bumbles on accident. But otherwise, these creatures are very happy. So any questions? Patty, you sent me an email. I have not received it yet. I'm waiting for it to show up. But otherwise, are there any questions? Because I will just start sending this information to Vicki, our office manager, on an email right now, so David doesn't forget it, because it happens really easy. So we can have that on hand so you can see, because these are great pictures and great tables, and you will see how everything meshes together and how important it is. And working with insects is also a tool in your IPM toolbox, where your insects are controlling predators, and if they're in a happy environment with no pesticide residue, then they're going to do their job pollinating and bringing more diversity into the landscape. Okay, got a question. My husband got stung last year while mowing near a bee hotel. Any advice to keep that from happening? Well, it'd be good to either mow in the morning or later in the evening. If you don't have a big area to mow, the bees will go down for the evening. So that works. Butterfly houses, that's another one that you can do with the slits. So you'll see the slits and they can crawl in. So that is very possible. Does bamboo have the potential to be invasive? Only if you're in a wet, boggy site where bamboo can spread rapidly. But out here in Nebraska in general, unless you have a very wet, boggy area in your landscape, no, it's something that can be controlled fairly easy. And if all else fails, a sharpshooter, a nice sharp spade and a corn knife will get the job done, keeping it in control.
Do we get the handout there?
Everyone will get the handout in an email. Yes, these cuckoo bees. Maybe we should go study these. So what is a cuckoo bee? I'm kind of a cuckoo itself, but let's look what the cuckoo bee is. So, I know. And because there is a reason why these creatures have those names. So I'm going to do a simple search, cuckoo bee and extension, because this is going to get rid of Wikipedia, our enemy, and extension. I can type today.
Get rid of Wikipedia, our enemy.
Yes, and extension and Master Gardener, Wikipedia really is our enemy because it's not a verified research source.
Oh, okay.
So really quick, we found some information. So here's Oregon State, University of Florida, Minnesota. Let's check out Minnesota. That's closer to home. So here's some up close pictures of that cuckoo bee. They in bee blocks, so they like blocks. One hole produced, however, his nest from multiple individuals can be stacked within holes, and all holes will produce. So that's kind of fascinating. It is a parasite of another insect. So remember, we talked about how some insects hunt others. This one is a parasite to another insect species. So let's get creative here and let's find out what this thing is. I'm not an entomologist by trade, nor do I claim to know everything. So let's look this thing up. See, guess what? I didn't put extension in, and guess what? Wikipedia is right up to the top. So we're going to put our and extension in here.
I didn't know this spring.
This is how you sort them out. So there's lots of information here. We'll find it. So it looks like another bee species that it's a parasite of. Yeah, it's foraging. This is from the University of Montana, Montana State. So it is another four solitary bee species. So one is a parasite to the other. Isn't that crazy? Very fascinating information. This is the cuckoo is the parasite to this one right here. So
What does that mean? He's a parasite to that one. Hunts them?
meaning that it is not, it's harmful to that other bee species and even kill it. So take over the nests. So yeah, this is pretty unusual nesting behaviors where you will see sometimes in cells in those bee species, they might kick each other out. So that can be a behavior that happens, but unless you really look close, you don't know what that is. It's going on. So it's an alfalfa leafcutter bee is what it is. So, but the cuckoo, but if you think about stories about cuckoos, about how cuckoo behavior steals other birds' nests, if you knew about that, makes sense. So you'll learn something every day. And that's the fun of learning. Yep. So that is what's fun doing that. So, but yeah, so isn't that interesting how these all work towards each other?
Did you say there was a workshop for beekeeping?
Yes, there is. And I will take you to my Facebook and it's posted on Facebook. The class is the 3rd of April. It's on a Sunday. It'll be out at the Research Center. It is coming right up.
Is there a sign up?
There's a login. You have to register ahead. So you can get into my work Facebook. Right here at the Research Center building. So not here in the extension office, but it is
The one
with the big university seal over the top of the front door, just across from the parking lot. Yes, where my office used to be, correct. Okay. Well, I thought I put it in. Okay, never mind. We put it in the one for the county. So our county extension website has everything under the sun. So please understand it's more than, it's all the groups. So here you go. Level 1 beekeeping workshop, April 3rd, Sunday from 10 to 5. It's at what we call the Snyder Classroom, which is that big building across the parking lot from the extension office. and you register, it's $70 per person, but it is a intense all-day workshop. And if you come to it and participate the entire time, then you get to count that as education hours. So, and you get a lot of really good information. Talks about the biology of the honeybee and all the equipment and the management. It's really good. Then there will be a field day on the 24th of April, and it will be at the orchard. We have an orchard straight south of that classroom as the crow flies to where they're going to install 4 hives with the Nebraska Beekeepers Association. So
Bring a lunch.
they have, the 24th is a potluck. So yes, bring something to eat and share. So they do a potluck on this one. 10 to 5 on both of them.
Is it the same food?
Yes, it's just $70. $70 for the class. The other one does not have a fee. So you take the class, then you're going to. No, this class rotates. This class rotates between Eastern and Western Nebraska. So it's not available every year out here. So that will be easy enough. But I can send this on your email too. I'll just take it as a picture and put it on. So I've got lots of stuff to send to you all tonight. So that's what I think it'll be a great opportunity for people to learn because it meshes with a lot of the material that you're learning in class. And we have to be really mindful of the bees, the honeybee, which is a social bee that you have to take care of in a hive that you're going to manage. You're not necessarily going to manage those wild bees. You just have to produce the right environment for them to come and stay and not use pesticides. So I will send this to everyone. Any questions online or in person?
Bumblebees settle flower beds for the winter. Do they ever do that typically or?
The question is, can bumblebees settle down into flower beds? And the thought there is, if you do not wrestle that environment, touch it, just leave it alone, very well could. If it was the right environment that they're happy and you don't bother them, they may set up shop. That's a possibility. Very much so. Very much so. And it is kind of surprising seeing these insects show up mysteriously and like, where do they come from? Well, in this case, with what we're doing with pollinators and butterflies and moths and conservation of native bees, you're going to attract all kinds of creatures. So it's a good thing in that sense. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to jump back to our schedule. So I'm going to go. So we're going to look at the course list. And we're going to talk about common landscape disorders. These are the boo-boos that show up, whether they were good intentioned or not. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite offenders of things to avoid. How about that?
Do you take pictures of my old yard?
No, though I can drive around North Platte and get a really nice collection of mistakes. I can get a really nice picture of mistakes, and then we'll quiz you and say, well, what would you do different? What would you do different? What's the landscape process that would help? And there are some topics that we have not covered this year, but some of you by common sense know what it is. or have an idea. So that's really what's important here is we all kind of lean on each other for information. We can talk through it. And this helps because I'm going to talk about things that I get questions about from the everyday person that calls or sends an email or whatever from the extension office. So some things you'll see over and over and over again for years. And so you'll become very well versed in it. And other things like, I don't know. So kind of like the cuckoo bee. We had to go do some looking up and found out exactly what it was doing. It was hijacking other cells. So it's really fascinating. That proves to us that you will never know everything. So that's okay. It's always good to learn. That's why we're curious. So any other comments, questions? If not, I will start preparing that big email for Vicki to upload onto your page. So you have it. I'm going to remind you, I will do a tutorial on, we'll put the Google Classroom up, the link, and where to get in. I will send you an email with instructions on what to do to get in. And so there's a code. I do not want to put the code out on the website because those are all unlisted materials. And if you're going to go to that level of work, you need to be a trained master gardener. So it cheapens it for all of you that paid the money and the resources. So, okay. So anyway, so you guys have a great evening. And we will see you next week. Wow. Next week with all the oopses and the boo-boos. And it's okay because we learn from those. And then we always like to tell people, learn from me. I did this so you don't have to do it. So it's the best way to visit with people and talk about, hey, it didn't work. I found out the hard way. And I've got a bunch of examples from my own over the years. So learn from me and learn from each other on what the good steps are. So thank you and have a great evening.
Oh.